Hello and welcome to another episode of Chats with Chip. I'm your host, Chip Griffin, the founder of Saga, the Small Agency Growth Alliance. And I am delighted to have with me a real expert on agencies, someone who can help guide you in some of the decisions you may have ahead, Jason Swank. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
It is great to have you. And before we dive into having our conversation, why don't you just share a little bit about yourself with listeners who may not already be familiar with you?
I started at an early age of 22 of starting my agency. I was an accidental agency owner like a lot of us and knew how to design a website and made fun of like my first website I created was called In Shit. It made fun of In Sync, and one of my friends looked like Justin Timberlake, so it was an easy transition and kind of got started by accident. And then the next thing I knew, I was accidental agency owner, had over 100 employees and grew over 8 figures, and we sold it. And then transitioned into doing absolutely nothing for a long time, and I was completely bored, like a lot of us that do that. And I just kept helping my old competitors. And they were like, "Hey, how'd you sell? How'd you do this?" And started a podcast called the Smart Agency Masterclass 9 years ago, and been running agency owner masterminds ever since.
And I would certainly encourage folks who are not regular listeners to your podcast to become listeners because you have a great array of guests on, particularly agency owners who have been there and done that and experienced some of the pains that I know listeners have, as well as some of the opportunities. So it is definitely worth a listen. And I think that I know I learn the most from just talking with other agency owners. I'm sure
Yeah.
you do as well. And so I think one of the common themes that we do see is exactly what you mentioned, which is that many are accidental owners. I know I was, you were. It's how you often get started in the business. And so I guess as you talk to accidental owners, what do you hear as the common pain points that maybe most of them are experiencing that they need help with?
Well, I mean, the one that I think is the most is around clarity. And it's actually the most boring. Like, I have an 8 system framework I always walk people through, but the first system is really the most boring. It's around clarity. We're accidental. We knew how to do something cool. Someone offered us money, and we started designing or, started taking on clients. And then what we realized was it we kept getting the same or similar clients. Kept because we were based on referrals. We didn't have any intention of where we're going. We didn't know what we needed to do. We just kept adding services, adding new clients. And then the next thing we knew, we were we created this great prison around ourselves because we were doing everything. We couldn't delegate anything to our team if we actually hired people because we never knew where the boat was actually going. So now everyone's coming to us for everything. And I I almost took a job to kind of sum all this up. I almost took a job with NASCAR to be their CMO. And they asked me two questions. They said, "What do you love doing every day? What don't you hate? You never want to do?" And I couldn't think of it in the interview, but I went home that night because I got to a point where we were a couple million in revenue. And my wife said, "Just shut the agency down. You're so miserable. You're so miserable to be around." I think a lot of us have gotten there, right? And so I took this interview. I came home and I basically started writing down everything I hated in the agency that I never wanted to do again. And then I started writing down everything I loved in the agency. And what I realized was I can actually do this. And when I did this, that's when the agency started taking off. So the exercise for all of you to do really quick, or well, spend about a half hour, 45 minutes. Take a sheet of paper, put your fist on the sheet of paper, draw a circle around it. Spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes of writing everything you do not like doing or never want to do in the agency ever again. And then after you're done with that, write down everything in the side of the circle of everything you love doing. And then now this should tell you what your role needs to do. So you can build the business around yourself. And then you can start delegating, saying no, using automation, AI, whatever you want. And then you can get that sense of peace and freedom back, right?
Yeah.
that we all wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing to me how you can talk with an agency owner and they're, on paper, it's a very successful agency, doing great business, having strong profits, but the owner is miserable because they've allowed inertia to carry them forward to where they are, and they haven't taken the time to get that clarity, to make it intentional decisions about what the business is going to do for them. Because ultimately, why take on all the risk and stress of having your own agency if it's not meeting your needs, giving you the money you want, the kind of work you want, the amount of work you want, the flexibility, all those kinds of things. And so I love that exercise that you've suggested. And I think that if an agency owner is able to define their role effectively, they're going to be more successful because they're going to actually enjoy it.
Yeah. And you got to think about too, like what types of clients do we want to work with? What types of services are we the most profitable at? If you think about if you're only going to be paid on performance only after you deliver, which services would you offer?
Mhm,
Who would you offer that to? And that's very specific, right? And then you can turn the agency around. And then you could start bringing people on that believe in the same values that you have,
mhm,
right? In order to really kind of catapult, because at the growing and scaling an agency is all about who, not how. And I'm not talking about just who you need to hire, but who do you need to become? Because your agency is only as, you know, it only scales as fast and up to the level that you're at. So if it actually is at a plateau, you're at a plateau. So how do
mhm,
you kind of upgrade yourself and get to the next level?
mhm. And, as you work with agency owners and they're trying to overcome this and try to figure out, okay, how do I go to that next level? I mean, sometimes I find an owner who does have an idea of what's outside that circle, what they don't want to do, but they can't figure out how to take that next step. So how do you counsel them to think about, making that incremental next step forward?
Well, they first need to know what's that next, like where's the destination, right? I mean, that's everything of like, do I want to build, and there's no right or wrong answer. Do I want to build a lifestyle agency? Do I want to build an incubator agency, kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk started, VaynerMedia, where it just kept building other brands? Do I want to build, a business that I can sell one day? There's different ways that we need to go about doing this. And then that will tell you which different types of people do we need to bring in order to, help us get there because we can't do it all ourselves. So if you're growing your agency right now and you're like, oh man, I'm doing all the sales, I'm all doing all marketing, doing all, I'm doing most of delivery, right? I'm doing, all these other things. There's only really kind of five roles as an agency CEO that you need to be. And I always tell people it's like, you got to transform from this, from an owner to a CEO, right? So, first one, set the vision of where you're actually going and communicate it to the team often, like often.
Mm,
Number two is all about coaching and mentoring your leadership team so you can build them up. And if you have more than five direct reports, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like, like
Yep.
you've managed teams before. I'm like, because you have to coach them to where they wanna be and where you're helping them. Number 3, you should be the face of the organization. I know a lot of people, and that's a whole nother conversation. People will be like, "Oh, then everybody's gonna wanna work with me." Bullshit. Gary Vaynerchuk's a great example. He doesn't work on any clients, for his agency, but he's the brand. So they need to have a face to the brand. The next is building strategic relationships. Only owners can, really kind of do that, get it to the next level. And then really understanding kind of the KPIs or the financials. What is the most important metrics that I need to know if I was on a deserted island to make sure my agency was going? So when you get those five roles, I'm going to tell you you're going to be completely and utterly depressed because you're going to go into a meeting, right? Like you're laughing, Chip, because I know this has happened to you, right? Like you're like, hey guys, you need my help? No, I'm good. Hey,
Yep.
you need my help? No, I'm good. You go to another one. No, I'm good. and and then you go home to your significant other and you're like, oh, the business doesn't need me anymore. The business doesn't need you for the old stuff. It needs you for
Right.
the new stuff,
Right.
which I just explained.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it is as someone who went through that evolution with a couple of my own businesses. It is a challenge to shift that role because it is not just shifting your role; it's shifting the mindset, right? And making sure that you're not getting too deep into the weeds on some of the things that you had to be involved with in years 1 and 2 of the business, but now you need to be focused on something different. And so it does take some real concerted intention on the part of the owner to make that transition.
Exactly.
One of the things that you mentioned was, thinking about, what you want from the business, lifestyle versus selling it versus other options as well. And I think, there's a lot of people who here's some of this advice. You shouldn't be building a lifestyle business, which I think is rubbish. If that's what you want, by all means, build it. And the reality is, frankly, most agencies are more likely to be lifestyle businesses than businesses that you sell. They can sell. You sold yours. I've sold a business as well. It certainly can happen, but I think that the expectations amongst a lot of agency owners are inflated as far as how easy it is for them to sell, what the sale looks like, how much money they're going to get from it. And so I spend a lot of time working with agency owners to give them a little bit of a reality check. So, as someone who's been there, done that, what do you say to an agency owner who comes to you and says, "Look, I got to get this in shape to sell it because this is my retirement, right? This is my nest egg."
Well, you know, there you it's all about figuring out the right systems in the right order, right? In order to get your agency to a point where you can sell. I'll give you kind of how you can do really quick evaluations of where your agency's at. So if you do want to sell for a significant amount, like there's people that sell all day long, and you see these ads from these people. I sold my agency, and
Right.
I'll show you how to do the same. But they're not telling you how much they sold it for, or they just kind of transition, right? So if you're under a million in EBITDA, which is, basically net profit, your agency is worth anywhere from 1 to 2x. I'm just giving you a basic formula. So most agencies out there that are maybe $1 million in top line, right? They think they're going to get a multiple on the top line revenue, the gross revenue. And this is the reality check for a lot of people. And if you look at their profitability, then it's around 100,000, maybe 20 or 100,000 or 200,000. So meaning they're worth 200 to 400,000 in valuation. And a lot of times that's kind of a kick in the gut, honestly.
Mhm,
But if you can get over the million in EBITDA, then you can get 5 to 8x sometimes.
mhm,
And then the next level up is 3 million in EBITDA. Then you can start kind of calling it out, right? Like, so the other agency that I'm a part owner in, we're a little over 10 million in EBITDA. So, we can start seeing multiples in the 10x,
mhm.
sometimes even a lot higher. And we bought, and within that agency, we bought 9 different agencies in the past 2 years, I think. Could have been 10. I've been losing track. But we're looking at the net profit, but we're also looking at how dependent is the business on the actual owners. So if they go away, what goes away with that?
Right.
And so if you understand kind of the valuation formula, a lot of people look at, then you can go, okay, what do we need to do? And what do we need to set up in order to have an opportunity to sell? Because Chip, you probably get these. I get these all the time too. I'm like, "Hey, I wanna buy your agency." "Okay." "Oh, but we're gonna do owner's financing," which means you're gonna pay yourself to give away your company, which is total bullshit.
Right. And I mean, the vast majority of deals that people hear about in the agency space are, the terms are not great. The total valuations, I mean, and even some of the ones that you see in the trade press, you'll see such and such an agency sold. And, you and I get to see the terms of some of these deals behind the scenes. And we know that they ain't all that cool. The valuation isn't great. They tend to come with very heavy earnouts. So, it's not a guaranteed sure thing. And also, oh, by the way, you have to become an employee of the acquirer for 2, 3, 5 years after the fact, which a lot of owners simply aren't prepared to do. And so you need to understand what's involved if that's what you want. Not to say it's wrong or bad. There's
Yeah,
certainly good reasons to sell, but you need to understand what it actually looks like to
yeah.
get there.
My business partners get pissed at me all the time within the agency because I talk out a lot of owners from selling. I'm
Mhm.
like, "Okay, you've built this amazing agency. You don't work that much anymore," which tells me that the business doesn't need you for all the old stuff, kind of like what I was telling you. You're making millions of dollars in profit that you can personally take away and, you know, figure out ways to not pay the tax man. Why do you want to sell? What am I missing?
Yep.
So I came up with like, and I tell people this, unless you need the money, unless there's some kind of medical thing, or you just hate it, that's the only reason you should sell. And then also too, if you hate it, I want you to have a plan and a very concrete plan of what you want to do next. Because if you just sell going, I want the money, like you can create a business now. Like people think I have to get to the 10 million mark to sell. That's not the case.
Mhm.
And they want to get to the 10 million mark because they think in their heads that, well, then I can go do X, Y, and Z and it gives me more freedom. But that's not necessarily the case.
Mhm.
So if you have that in mind, and you mentioned the earnout, I'm going to tell you, like, it cost me millions. I did well, but I left millions on the table because I had bad advice from the business broker that we used, that we hired after all these companies were coming after us. And like we never saw that. Like earnouts are made to designed to make you fail. So be happy with the cash and be happy with all that. And then also too, like you mentioned it, you got to be an employee of this company
Right.
to make sure like you like the culture, make sure you believe in this. It's hard because a lot of us have been doing this for a decade or however long. If you're younger and you've been doing it for 2 years and 3 years, or at least 3 years, it might be a little easier for you. But for some of the old farts like us, working for someone is going to be a complete nightmare.
Right. Yeah. Very, very difficult for sure.
Right.
You mentioned people wanting to sell because they hate their business, or hate being in that business or whatever. And I see that a lot as a motivator to sell. And I think that one of the key things that they need to do at that point is figure out what do they hate, right? Use that exercise that you suggested earlier in this episode about, writing down what it is that you don't want to do and what you do want to do. And can you change the business? Can you evolve the business so that you don't hate it? Because I will tell you that taking a successful business and evolving it is a whole lot easier than starting over in most cases, unless you're going in a completely different direction. Hey, I want to be a fly fisherman now or something like that. You want to just go hog wild in a different direction. Then, maybe starting from scratch is better. But more often than not, if it's anything like the current business, you're going to be better off taking the success that you've had and moving in that direction from that place of success.
Yeah, what I've found is agency owners, their risk tolerance changes over time. Like in the very beginning, we're not risking very much because we're nothing. And then we start building it up a little bit more, it actually like we have more to risk. And then as life progresses too, like we start acquiring more assets, a family, all this kind of stuff. So it puts more pressure on us. And then when the business kind of starts plateauing because we plateaued, right? It only grows up to the level that you're leveled up at. They don't have a strategy for scaling themselves, scaling the business or any of the other things. So then they get worried and they think, oh, it's kind of like the Tommy boy, right? Like when he's doing like he's crashing the cars, like, oh, let's look at the person with the other brakes and like starts ramming them. And that's what we feel our business is like we're on fire and it's
Mhm.
going to burn down tomorrow. And there's a lot of uncertainty there. So we're like, we need to get out. We need to find a
Mhm.
new business. We need to go do software. Like I can tell you, after I sold my agency, I went to go build an iPhone app. I hated it. The grass
Mhm.
is only greener on the side you water. So just remember that. But if you come up with, you really think where you want to go, how do I level up? What are the strategies I need to put in place? Or what's the plan? If you come up with a plan, I don't care if the plan works or not. You're going to have so much more certainty and take away that uncertainty in order to make the right decision. So then you're inspiring your team rather than demotivating them because you suck. Like because your mentally attitude just sucks and it just brings down the rest of the team. Like we've all gone through that. Like all the business is going to shitter and like we're blaming all the people and and your whole team senses it. And
Yep.
that's just a collision disaster, going down to the bottom.
Well, I like what you're talking about in terms of a plan too, because I think that, having a plan is reassuring in and of itself, but more importantly, it's the process that you go through to create the plan
Yeah.
that is what makes the difference. I often have a business owner who will say to me, do I need to put together a business plan? Well, not really, because as soon as you put it together, it's going to go on a shelf and you're never ever going to look at it. But the process that you go through to think through what does the business look like? What direction is it going? All of those things, that process is really important and does help lead to your success. So have the plan because of what it takes to do it.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
glad you mentioned, yeah, because I hate business plans too. Like if you're just doing a business
oh,
plan to do a business
they're
plan,
stupid.
like
They're
it's
stupid.
they're
But
dumb.
but the process does make you think about things.
Yes.
But just don't think that this is something that you need to, pull out as your guidebook every week and say, well,
Yeah.
in paragraph 7 of page 3, we said we were going to do this. Let's do this.
Yeah. I mean, it's like what we're talking about, everyone is like, if your business was based on referrals, which just isn't scalable and it's just kind of leveled off, well, come up with a plan of like, how can we generate leads? How can we generate more awareness? Oh, I need to create a content. Oh, I need to create a podcast. Cool. Like that's a plan. That's going to give you the confidence you need to get that momentum, to get that ball rolling up a hill. So then you get to the top and then it's easy sailing. You're just, you're pushing it downhill. So
Right. But now that you've mentioned leads and we've talked about people, wanting to get out of the business because they hate it. A lot of agency owners want to get out of it because they hate having to sell. And so they say, I need to wash my hands of this. And so, I know that you have agency owners coming to you and saying, hey, how do I get it to the next level? How do I, increase that sales engine? Or worse, hey, I just lost a whale client. I need to replace them tomorrow. How do I do that? So when
yeah.
when when an agency owner is coming to you with these challenges, how do you counsel them?
Yeah, I look at it as a healthy agency or the perfect agency has a multi-channel approach for generating business, right? They have an inbound strategy for they putting out helpful content that's making people aware and then bringing them and then making them trust. So then when they chat with you, there's no selling. I never sell anything. I'm never trying to convince anybody of anything, and neither is any of my team. But they're coming to us because they've seen some of our content talking about how to get the budget 199% of the time. So then they don't waste time with the wrong prospect. Or, we're putting out case stories of people that had success from X, Y, and Z. Marty's a great example. He's in our mastermind. And we basically told him, I said, he goes after big brands. He said, let's do some remarketing ads of just the success stories you had from your brands. About 3 months went by, a large airline called him, brought him in, and he goes into the pitch. And they literally don't really ask questions, which is a bad sign, right? When you're pitching, you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, crap, I didn't get this thing." And they go, "When can you start?" He's like, "Oh, like, really? Like, this was horrible." Like, there was no back and forth. And he asked him about like 3 months later after like they signed the deal and everything because you don't want to jinx it, right? Like, "Why are you going with me?" And he
Yeah.
goes, "Hey man, I watched all your videos. We've watched all your videos. We know you can do it." So creating an inbound strategy, the putting out the content. Second one is an outbound strategy. And please do not hire those companies that promise you 10 appointments guaranteed. I've never seen one of them work in the past 25 years. I think you could probably agree too, Chip, right? Um, it's just they're that's a whole nother story. But what you can do, so like for example, I'll give you guys a strategy. If you're a B2C agency and you're trying, let's say you're selling, say you want to work with brands in the beauty industry, makeup. Well, what I would do is let's say this was lipstick. I want to get a pen. Let's just say this was lipstick. So I would make a list of all of the brands that I want to work with that I can help, that can pay the price that I need. I don't care how big they are. I want you to buy their lipstick, buy their product. Then what I want you to do is identify the decision makers. Then I want you to create a video, create a note, create whatever it is saying, "Hey, Chip, I just bought your lipstick. I love it." And you're holding it up so they know you're a customer, like put it on or whatever you want, and saying, you know, I love your product, but I felt like something felt short on whatever stage it was. I would love to kind of just tell you about it. Let me know if you have 5 minutes to jump on a call. I can promise you, we did this left and right. I interviewed people from International Hotel Group, IHG, the CMO. I said, how do people get your attention? They're like, call me up with something unique. So come up with an outbound strategy for that. And then the third is strategic partnerships. Look at the people going after your audience. It could be your competition, could be technology companies, publications, associations, whatever it is. See how you can actually help them, and 2 plus 2 equals 80 versus 4, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's how we landed LegalZoom because we were one of the best partners in the world for Sitefinity. We landed Hitachi because we were one of the best partners in the world for Microsoft. because we built these relationships. That goes back to becoming the agency CEO. So those are the three channels to really create a pipeline for your agency where you can pick and choose your clients.
Mhm. Well, I think we've covered a tremendous amount of ground here in just 25 minutes. We talked about everything about why you want to have the agency, to exiting it, to operations and processes, to sales. So, if someone though is interested in learning more and accessing some of the resources that you have available, how can they learn more about you?
Yep. Two places. You can go to agencymastery360.com. We have tons of resources out there. And then if you want to make sure that we're sending you that information, go to swank.it. So SWENK.it. So you got to swank it.
And as you always sign off your videos, have a swank day,
Have a
right?
swank
So,
day. That's right.
Jason, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and wisdom with the audience here. I'm sure that many of them will be checking you out, and I hope that they're all subscribing to your podcast and your lists and all that because there are lots of great resources available there.
All right.
Again, my guest today has been Jason Swenk, and my name, or sorry, and this has been Chats with Chip. Thanks for joining us.